Words are more than sounds. They shape, they create, they encode realities. Great leaders, philosophers, spiritual teachers, and people who studied human behavior understood this. They knew words shape perception, experience, and meaning, and that words are creative force. So what would happen if you discovered that your words you were using every day aren't actually random, that there is an invisible structure inside them shaping your reality? Some words drain your energy, others expand it. Some keep you trapped in the same loop day after day, while others open a portal into new possibilities. By the end of this episode, you're going to unlock a new level of personal power, because the truth is, if you're not consciously choosing your words, you're unconsciously reinforcing a reality you didn't intentionally create. Whoever controls language controls perception, and whoever controls perception controls reality. This is huge, and this isn't just something I read in a book. This became real for me 13 years ago, and I'm sure you've heard my core story, sitting on the end of my bed after another 12-hour day in the treatment room. I was working 60-hour weeks. I'd created quite a successful business. We were sitting at around 890,000. And I created this business out of sheer work ethic and just passion. And that night that I came home, it was 9 o'clock at night, and I had my 3 little babies, and they came at me to say goodnight and, stayed up to see their mummy when she got home from work. And I had nothing left in the tank. And this is where my whole life flashed before me. It cracked me open. It was where I started to question everything. It was my epiphany. Why was I the way that I was? And I knew that I was the problem, but I was also the solution. And this is the moment that I actually started to question everything, my patterns, my behaviors, the way I spoke to myself, the way I narrated my life. And from there, I went really deep, and it pushed me into this amazing world of human behavior, neuroscience, epigenetics, and quantum physics. And what started as curiosity became a complete reprogramming of how I lived. And my core teachings in my program, the School of Mastery, where I help salon and clinic owners not just create a profitable, outstanding, beautiful business, but a great life, great health, beautiful relationships, because I realized something confronting and empowering at the same time in that moment. I wasn't consciously creating my life. I was unconsciously reinforcing it through my words, through my internal dialogue, through the stories I repeated without even realizing. That awareness became the catalyst of everything that changed next for me. I moved from destructive patterns and unconscious living into deliberately creating my dream life. And I look now and think, oh my goodness. I went on to create 3 beautiful businesses, a $5 million empire, a podcast, doing retreats, creating a skin program, creating my personal brand, and really becoming the mum that I always wanted to be, but also just even the physical things that I've called into my life, my dream home, and realizing that I was actually the one that could create it all. And, one of the biggest shifts was learning to listen to the words I was speaking, not just out loud, but internally. And this is something I am relentless about in my community. We don't just talk about mindset, we pay attention to our language, because language carries energy. Language is really the instructions, they're declarations. They shape expectations, behaviors, and outcomes. Our words create our reality, whether we are aware of it or not. So as we move through these teachings, I want you to start listening differently, because your words are commentary. They are creation. Things like, I have to work hard to make money. It sounds normal, but if you feel the energy of it, it's pressure, exhaustion, it's force, that we can start to reprogram. Money comes to me always, always. I am paid to exist. Money comes to me through who I be, not just what I do. Some of the things that I've heard lately, January is quiet. That sentence is also setting an expectation and creating a reality. So instead, January is a powerful month. I get to create results in every season. I need to do this. That's an obligation. That's weight. I get to do this. I choose to do this. I'm not a good leader. That's not the truth. That's an identity someone picked up along the way. Replace it with leadership is a skill I'm actively developing. I become a more effective leader every single day. One of the words that I hear a lot of our salon and clinic owners, when I jump in with them and ask them what they truly want, and it's, I don't know. And every time we say we don't know, then our brain will always deliver what we tell it, the reticular activating system. So if you're saying that you don't know, then it's going to shut down all your creativity. And so our words are so powerful. Couple of the beautiful teachers I really want you and books that you can read is Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. Louise Hay was one of the first people to really bring this idea into mainstream, that words are not neutral, they're instructions. The core teachings of her book is simple but profound. The words you speak, especially to yourself, become beliefs, and those beliefs become your emotions and your physical reality. Louise taught that repetitive self-talk becomes the internal program. Language carries emotional charge, and over time, your body and nervous system responds to those words you consciously live in. Whether you believe her metaphysical explanation or not, the psychology holds truth. Your nervous system is always listening. And if you're constantly saying, I'm bad with money, I'm always behind, this is not who I am, I'm not a morning person. If you think about the stories that you're telling yourself, your system adapts to that identity. This book is powerful because it makes you conscious of how casually you've been scripting your life with your language. Another beautiful teacher and a beautiful book that I read consistently is Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. This is where science comes in. Dr. Joe explains why people stay stuck in the same emotional and behavioral loops, even when they desperately want to change. And one of the most profound teachings in this book is your words reinforce your default mode network, the identity autopilot of your brain. Here's what this means in really simple terms. Your brain runs on prediction. It uses your past experience, your emotional memories, and repeatable thoughts to decide whether you're safe and is it familiar. The language that you use daily strengthens those neural pathways in your brain. So when you keep telling yourself the same story about yourself, who you are, what you can handle, what's possible for you, you're literally wiring your brain to create the same future. This is why motivation doesn't work. This is why, this is why really understanding change doesn't come from wanting a new life. It comes from interrupting the language and the emotional patterns that keep your old identity alive. Another book, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. This is such a profound book. This book isn't about words directly, but it might be the most important one on this list. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust, and what he discovered was that meaning determines your survival. Two people can have the same experience, the same external circumstances, the same suffering, the same loss, yet their internal language and interpretation shapes completely different realities. Frankl taught that we don't always control what happens to us, but we always have control over the meaning we assign to it. Meaning becomes the framework through which life unfolds. And this is critical. Your words don't just describe your life, they define what life means to you. And meaning shapes resilience, leadership, expansion, and how much responsibility you're willing to take for your future. This book reminds us that language is power, not because it's positive or negative, but it determines how you relate to reality itself. So different books, different lenses, same truth. Words are not decorations, they are directions. And the language you live in becomes the life you live. Avoiding negative speech isn't just about being positive, it's about understanding the truth. Negative speech is an act of self-cursing. Every time you speak about lack, limitation, failures, especially about yourself, you're reinforcing the very conditions you say you don't want. We've been taught to focus on what we don't want instead of focusing on what we do want. Think about how often we predict our future through complaining, worrying, saying things like, this isn't going to work out for me. I'm just not good at this. I don't know. Talking about times are tough. I can't find team. There's so much that's really, our words hold so much power. These harmless thoughts, they are spells. We learn spelling as children, how to construct words, but what we really learn is how to cast language into reality. Because when you repeatedly speak ill of yourself or others, you don't just describe reality, you create the conditions you complain about. Speech shapes the field you live in. There's another side to this. Speaking well, speaking intentionally is one of the most powerful acts available to you. When you bless your money, your work, your opportunities, you shift your relationship with them. And when you speaking against people, situations, or yourself, victim mentality, you remove resistance. This isn't about being a blind optimist. It's about understanding the language changes the external environment you're operating in. When your speech changes, the words you speak, the field around you changes. And when the field around you changes, new possibilities become available. This is when we see synchronicities, opportunities, people, situations, circumstances, connections, momentum come into our field. And why affirmations really work. They're not just woo-woo, they're very, very powerful. This is where affirmations come in. Affirmations aren't just wishful thinking. They are intentional commands that interrupt self-cursing. When you affirm a situation before it changes, you stop reinforcing the old patterns, and you do this long enough, and something else emerges. New doors open, new opportunities come in, and you start to see them. Good flows to you. Whether you believe in affirmations or not, here's what's undeniable. You no longer speak against yourself. You quietly, you quieten that internal dialogue that's been running on autopilot, the doubt, the self-criticism, the limitations. And over time, what you consciously speak internally and externally becomes your lived reality. And how reality is built, let's break it down practically so you understand it. There is a creative sequence happening all day, every day. Your thoughts create your emotions, which creates how you speak and the actions you take, and ultimately the results that you get in your life. You think something, that thought creates a feeling. Feelings are very, very strong. Your emotions, your emotional home that you live in. And those feelings influence what you say, and what you say drives what you do. Thought is a very subtle vibration. Emotions and feelings are much stronger. Action is the strongest expression. And here's the key insight. Speech is one of the most frequent forms of action you take every single day. You speak more than you do anything else. So if your speech is action, and action shapes your outcomes, what do you think words are doing? So one of the practical reality checks that you can take right now, if you speak negative about yourself all day, can you create opportunities? If you're constantly talking about how hard it is to make money and how little you have, how exhausted you feel, is that the identity of someone who can create wealth, ease, and expansion on purely a practical level? The answer is no, because your emotions drive your actions, and your emotions are shaped by the language you live in. If thoughts influence reality, words amplify it. They're strong, they're loud, they're repeatable. Every word you speak sends a signal to your nervous system, your identity, and the words, you're interacting with. So the question isn't whether words matter. The question is, what reality are you reinforcing every time you open your mouth? And I don't know if you've ever heard, the scientist Masai Emoto, and he did a water experiment, and Emoto placed water into different containers and labeled each bottle with specific words. Some bottles were labeled with words like love and thank you and gratitude, and others were labeled with phrases carrying negative emotions like I hate you or you're disgusting. And he left labels on the bottle for several hours, then froze the water, and after freezing it, photographed the water crystals. And according to him, there was images. Waters exposed positive words formed beautiful snowflake structures, while the water exposed to negative language formed distorted, chaotic, fragmented patterns. Emoto claims that writing words, spoken words, and even emotional intentions influence how the crystals formed, and that spoken words have the strongest effect on all. Now, his work has been criticized by mainstream science for lacking, this experiment. But whether you view this experiment as literal or metaphorical, the science is there and it's undeniable. Words carry vibration, and vibration influences form. Why this matters. Your body is mostly made up of water. So the way you speak to yourself, about others, shapes your internal environment, your emotions, your neurological and physiological being. Even if you completely dismiss the photographs, the metaphor reminds us is incredibly powerful. Positive language expands you, negative language contracts you. And in every moment, your words are imprinting the chemistry of your life. Limiting beliefs are learned through language. Most people struggle with limiting beliefs, beliefs like money's hard to make, money doesn't grow on trees. It's funny, the two things that we heard. We've all lived in different households, but we've all got that programming. And if I want it done right, I need to do it myself. And here's the question. Where did those beliefs come from? They were spoken to you, repeated around you, modeling in language. They become reality because they eventually became your words. Some people spend years trying to reprogram limiting beliefs, but there's a far more effective way and entry point. Stop speaking them. Every time you repeat a negative belief, you continually install that belief. But every time you feel the urge to say it and you don't, you starve it, you cut the oxygen, you remove the reinforcement. And over time, that belief weakens. One of the things that our community does is that I'm unemotionally unavailable for that thought, and we're continually course correcting our thoughts and our words. We are so committed to making sure that our words are the words that are going to actually create our reality. This is neuroscience. This isn't just, conceptual. It's neurology. Peak performance research shows that when you catch yourself before speaking a negative pattern, you interrupt the neural circuit connected to that belief. And you're literally breaking the pathways from thoughts, emotion, and speech. It flips the circuit breaker. And with constant practice, the brain remaps itself. How cool is this? New neural pathways that no longer reinforce start to dissolve, and new ones begin to be formed. This is how identities actually change. This is why so many people do not achieve their goals and dreams and all their desires at the start of the year, because they're trying to do the actions, but they're not coming in and actually changing the internal world that creates the external world. Speaking new beliefs into your reality, just as you can dissolve old beliefs, you can create new ones by hearing yourself speak a new identity. This is why affirmations and incantations are so powerful. Not because they're magical thinking, but because we train the brain through repetition and emotion. Those declarations, really your words are declarations, and a series of words spoken with intention to produce a specific effect. When you speak differently, you feel differently. And when you feel differently, you act differently. And when your actions change, your life changes. This is how internal transformation becomes external realities. Words are force. Words are not passive. They influence emotional states, behavior, choices, nervous system regulation, and long-term identity patterns. They are creative force or a destructive one, depending on how consciously you use them. And when you understand this, you realize something very powerful. You can change the way you think by changing the way you speak. And my invitation to you is over the next 24 hours, simply notice, what are the words you're speaking? What are the words that are getting spoken in your business? What phases do you repeat? What are the stories that you're telling yourself? What internal dialogue is running on autopilot? Take an inventory, because you'll likely discover certain spells, certain patterns of language that don't support the reality you're trying to create. You can jot them down or course correct in the moment. Notice them at the end of the day or through the day and begin to practice intentional speaking. Not perfection, just awareness. And watch how your internal state and eventually your external reality begins to shift as you start speaking different and, calling in the future that you want into an existence. And I'm super excited that I'm going to be running a beautiful workshop to show you on the 5th of January. Let me just get the date up. It's called Design Your Year Workshop. It's 1:30 on 5th of January, New South Wales time. And if you've watched this and you want to be a part of this, there will be a link somewhere in the show notes. Come in. I'm going to show you how to internally shift and then all the external things for you to be able to actually in 2026 for all your dreams, desires, goals, for you to actually be able to create your life and your business by design. And I'd love for you to share in the notes below what's been your biggest takeaway today.